Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Anggito Abimayu, and my student ID number is 20291005. Today I would like to do my individual assignment for the final exam of current issue in English language teaching. And there I'm going to explain about 4 points that the 1 to 3 numbers are going to be my personal explanation, and my personal explanation about myself, and the fourth things I'm going to explain is my journal reviewing toward the toward the ALT and psychology conditions. Number one, I'm going to explain about myself. My name is Anggito Abimayu, and I'm currently living in Selong. I am 2 years late to go to the university now. Therefore I'm older than the rest of the people in the class. Because I was working as tour guide in one of the travel agency in Lombok, and my family are happy family, and we live in small house. And my goal of taking English department is I want to be a businessman that can globally market, or even produce a product that can go internationally, that I think will requires English on that, in the process of marketing, or even in the process of posting my product in my Instagram, for example, or even the web that I'm gonna make probably in the end of the day. So move on to the last part. I'm going to explain about an article from a journal that I have reviewed. So I'm gonna share a screen so you can clearly see the context of the article. Okay, the article that I take from journal is English Language Education and Learner Psychology. And the keywords are learner psychology, language education, English foreign language classroom, and educational psychology. We understand that English is a prestigious language, right? And English is often used in international platform, like in United Nations, or even any any platform that requires more than one countries having a diplomacy in that platform, right? Therefore, the language that must be used in the meeting, or even in the process of meeting, will always be English. Therefore, we say that English is international language. But secondly, in Indonesia, or even in the journal, it takes example of Iran, in which that many knowledge products are provided in English, right? We understand that there are a lot of knowledge or information which is provided in our mother tongue language, or even in our native language. But mostly, if we talk in a vast scale, or even in a broader knowledge, we think that knowledge which is provided broadly will always be provided in English, because English is used as the we can say kata pengantar in providing the knowledge itself, right? Therefore teacher in English foreign language classroom needs to have the clear cut idea of what, how, and how much to teach to the students, right? Therefore, in the discussion, we're going to talk about several things. That is the learner psychology, psychological perspective of learning, behavioral perspective, cognitive perspective, learning difficulties, and lastly, we're going to jump to the conclusion. So move on to this discussion, right? Learner psychology. Learner psychology has attempted to use the findings of social, developmental, and the child psychology of individual variation to have understanding of the learning method, which consists of social and ethical, as well as educational learning. And secondly, psychological perspective learning is to recognize the personality of student at distinct level. Educational psychology develops and applies theories of human development, which are primarily based on the level through which they measure mental of skill, cognition, social rules, and moral reasonings and beliefs about the kind of nature of knowledge. So at the very first place, according to the psychological perspective of learning, teacher needs to understand the psychology of student at a very distinct level, right? For example, a student have a different starting point with B or even C or the rest of the student. So the teachers needs to know how to treat or even how much to give lesson to the student, so the student will not have like a depression, anxiety in learning English. And it sometimes happens in the level of a blended learning or even in a fully online learning class where teachers completely give text for the students, which really burden them. Therefore, it will left them depressed or even leave them anxious with the teachings that the teacher give. Therefore, to recognize the personality of student at distinct levels, educational psychology it will help the students to to learn with joys and fun, right? And jump to the last discussion. That is the learning difficulties. Number one is the parents' pressure for high grades. B, lack of educational resources at the institution or school. C, the pressure of work and assignment. D, mismatch between the institution and learners' abilities, where it can be too high or too low. E, negative behaviors and the attitude teachers. Learners low as self-esteem as the organization expectation are not met, and G, fear, and so on and so forth, right? In learning difficulties, there is a rule of parent. There is a lure of parent which affects to the psychology of student. And B, the lack of educational resources at the institution school, pressure of homework and assignment. We think that pressure of homework and assignments are quite relevant to what happened in our institution. That is Undikma Mataram or Mandalika University, in which several or certain lecturers are sometimes giving homework and assignment that put pressure, that give quite pressure to the students, which makes them stressed, for example, or even it affects to the spirit or even to the desires of students to learn. Therefore, in the perspective of psychological learning, teachers needs to understand the psychology of student in a very distinct level. Therefore, it can solve the problem of the students to learn the English in the foreign language classroom, English foreign language classroom set. So in conclusion, that in teaching English as a major of the student, teachers need to understand the learner's psychology, the behavioral perspective, the cognitive perspective, or even the learning difficulties of the student in order to gain a very in order to gain or even produce a very productive and conducive learning for the student. Maybe that's quite what it is I'm explaining right now to finish my final test for the current issue in LT. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.